Bombo Network News Noontime Edition.
Araw ngayon ng Sabado, Agosto 8 o 5, 2023.
Sa ulo ng ating mga balita, palarong pambansa ay tuloy-tuloy ang maaksyon pa rin ng mga laban, lalo na sa boxing. Dito ho sa huling araw, nagpalarong pambansa at tinaasahan ho ang awarding mamayang hapon.
Ilang kaanak ng mga nawawalang sabungero umatras sa isinampang kaso laban sa 6 na gwardiya ng Manila Arena.
At sa ating update, ang Philippine Institute of Volcanology and Seismology nakapagtala ng mahigit 200 pa na low-frequency volcanic earthquake dyan sa Bulkang Mayon.
5 vintage bomb naman na ginamit ng sundalong Hapon noong World War II na diskubre sa pinapagawang kampo ng militar sa Sorsogon.
Sa ating balita sa ibayong dagat, nasa 11 patay sa pagguho ng lupa sa isang mountainous area at mountain resort doon sa Georgia.
Mga lider naman ng 6 na pangunahing relihiyon sa buong mundo, kabilang na ang Islam, Buddhism at marami pang iba, nagsama-sama rin sa pambihirang pagkakataon sa isang seremonya kasabay ng World Youth Day sa Portugal.
Sa ating balitang palakasan, ang Los Angeles Lakers superstar na si Anthony Davis pumirma ng extension na nagkakahalaga naman ng mahigit 10 bilyong piso. At live nationwide via satellite, dumako na tayo sa mga detalye ng ating mga balita. Kinuwestiyon mga kabombo, mga ka-Star Nation, ng Commission on Audit ang validity ng mga claims na sakop ng Philippine Health Insurance Corporation o PhilHealth para naman sa RT-PCR test na nagkakahalaga ng 8.2 billion pesos mula sa 2020 hanggang 2022. Sa pinakuling ulat sa naturang tanggapan, sinabi ng Commission on Audit na binayaran ng ahensya ang mahigit 2.4 na milyon na RT-PCR test na isinagawa ng partner contractor nito kahit na ang mga claims ay hindi naman suportado ng proper accomplished case investigation forms. Napansin ng mga auditor na ang issue ng hindi kumpletong dokumento ng RT-PCR tests ay naplag na ng audit ng PhilHealth para naman sa 2020 at 2021. Nirerekomenda ng Commission on Audit na isumiti ng naturang tanggapan ang mga wastong nagawang case investigation forms upang suportahan ang mga na-question ng mga claims para maiwasan ng audit suspension o kaya naman ay disallowance at ipinaliwanag ng pamunuan ng Philippine Health Insurance Corporation na may mga hamon sa pagkolekta ng maayos na accomplished documents o yung case investigation forms lalo na sa kasagsagan ng pandemya ng COVID-19. Gayunman, sinabi ng Commission on Audit na nakipag-ugnayan na ito sa mga kasosyong kontratista na hindi na tatanggapin ang mga claims na may mga hindi wastong nagawang case investigation forms. Sa kasalukuyan ng audit team ay nagsasagawa naman ng dialogo kasama na ang Philippine Health Insurance Corporation Management at ang partner contractors nito para naman i-validate yung mga hamon na kinakaharap sa pagbibigay ng mga kinakailangang suportang dokumento para sa nasabing claims.
Samantala, dismayado naman ngayon ng ilang kaanak ng mga nawawalang sabungero matapos na iatras ng pamilya ng 6 sa mga nawawalang biktima ang kanilang isinampang kaso laban sa 6 pang gwardiya ng Manila Arena kung saan napaulat na nawawala ang kanilang mga kaanak. Sa ulat ng mga pamilya ng mga nawawalang sabungero na sina John Claude Inonog, Rondel Cristorum, Mark Joseph Velasco, Roel Gomez, James Bakay at Marlon Bakay ang nag-urong ng kaso laban kina Julie Patidongano alias Dondon, Glir Codilla, Mark Carlo Zabala, Virgilio Bayog, Johnny Consolacion at Roberto Matiliano Jr. na pawang may mga warrant of arrest. Ayon kay Senior Deputy State Prosecutor Richard Anthony Fadulon, nakakagulat ang ginawang ito ng ilang kaanak ng mga nawawalang sabungero sa kadahilan ng masigasig-an niya sila nung una na ituloy ang pagsasampa ng kaso laban sa mga sospek. Ngunit sa kabila nito ay tiniyak niya na magpapatuloy pa rin ng mga pagdinig sa kaso at ang korte lamang ang makakapagsabi kung itutuloy ba ito o hindi. Samantala, kaugnay pa rin ito ay tiniyak naman ng Philippine National Police na ipagpapatuloy pa rin ng kapulisan ang paghahanap sa mga nawawalang sabungero at makikipagtulungan din ito sa pamilya ng mga sospek upang makakuha ng lead at alamin ang kanilang mga kinaroroonan.
Samantala, inanunsyo ng Philippine Institute of Volcanology and Seismology na nagkaroon ng 248 na low-frequency volcanic earthquakes ang Bulkang Mayon sa nakalipas na magdamag. Kasama na sa naturang bilang ang 124 na pagkaganapan ng pagyanig na tumagal ho ito mula 1 hanggang 18 minuto. Ayon naman sa ahensya, nagtala din ito ng 5 pyroclastic density current events at 112 rockfall events. Sa kabilang banda, nasa average na 1,602 na tonelada ng volcanic sulfur dioxide ang ibinuga ng Bulkang Mayon sa pinakahuling naitala ng Philippine Institute of Volcanology and Seismology. Ang lava flow ay patuloy pa rin sa naitatala doon ho sa may tuktok ng Mayon sa nakalipas na 24 na oras na namataan naman sa may Bunga Gali at Miisig Gali pati na sa Basud Gali ng nasabing bulkan. Sinabi ng Philippine Institute of Volcanology and Seismology na may bisa pa rin ang Alert Level 3 sa Bulkang Mayon dahil ito ay kasalukuyang nasa isang mataas na antas ng aktibidad at ang mapanganib na pagsabog sa loob ng ilang linggo o kahit ng mga araw ay maaari pa ring mangyari. Una nang nagbabala ang ahensya na ang lahar at yung sediment-laden stream flows ay maaari pa rin mangyari dahil sa malakas na mga naitatalang buhos ng ulan.
The biggest youth sporting event in the country. Palarong Pambansa 2023 updates.
Mainit na mga laban ang tinutukan ng Bombo Radio Philippines coverage team dyan sa nagpapatuloy pa rin na palarong pambansa ngayong huling araw na ng mga laban sa naturang sporting event. May pag-uulat live mula sa Marikina City, si Bombo Levi De Leon.
Yes, Bombo, Dennis at mga kabombo, ngayong araw na ho ang huling bakbakan dito po sa boxing events kung saan nagpapatuloy pa po yung bakbakan nila pero nasa 4 na atleta na lang or 2 bouts na lang po ang natitira sa mga kanina nga, Bombo, Dennis, na-witness natin yung bakbakan ng unang 8 bouts kung saan ay dinomina nitong mga rehiyon natin mula Mindanao, partikular na itong Northern Mindanao at nandyan din sa listahan na yan ang Soc Sergeant. Pero sa nakita natin kanina, medyo nabalanse naman ng ilang rehiyon pang natitira, partikular na sa Western Visayas, yung natitira nilang mga atleta. Dahil kanina nga, Bombo, Dennis, sa 4 na bouts, 4 na yon ay galing sa Northern Mindanao. 2 lang ho ang nakasungkit ng gintong medalya at 2 rin ho yung natalo, which means automatic na sila makauwi ng silver medal. Sa panig naman ng Davao Region, 2 atleta lang ang natitira doon ho sa larong boxing kung saan ang isa ay hindi maswerteng pinalad at nakauwi ng silver medal at yung isa naman ho ay maswerteng pinalad ay siya ring nakauwi ng gold medal, Bombo, Dennis. At dagdag pa niyan, pakinggan muna natin ang naging statement nitong si Rafael Medjoda III, ang coach ho yan ng boxing team sa Davao Region or itong ang Region 11.
Until migrate from Davao City, 2 lang yung pumasok sa amin sa finals po. So, salamat sa Diyos at sa mga panalangin ng mga kasama namin sa mga pamilya na nag-support sa amin sa isa't isa. So, at least sa preparation namin, matagal doon pa sa Dabra, nakuha ko yung panalo ngayon. Kasi
Yes, Bombo Levy.
Yes, Bombo Dennis. Yes, Bombo Dennis, kanina nga na-witness din natin. Bagamat apat na atleta ho ang nakaka-survive naman dito ho sa panig ng Northern Mindanao. Sinabi ko nga kanina, pero parang naging hindi maganda yung entrada nila kasi nga sunod-sunod na talo. Ito nga ang nakamit ng dalawa nilang atleta dahil nasungkit ng Western Visayas ang unang gold medal. Tinalo nga itong atleta from Northern Mindanao at sa second bout na yan, Bombo Dennis, natalo uli itong atleta mula naman sa Northern Mindanao. Tinalo ho yan nitong atleta nga mula Davao Region na itong si Miguelito Bantilan. Kaugnay ho dito, pakinggan naman natin ang panig ni Miguelito Bantilan, ang gold medalist sa larong boxing ho para sa Davao Region.
Salamat ako sa una sa Panginoon na iniwan niya ako sa Olympic. Salamat sa mga coaches, sa mga sports group, sa US, sa atin. Maraming salamat sa mga...
Okay, Bombo Levy.
Yes, Bombo Dennis.
Oo, maliban dito sa tinutukan natin mga laban sa larangan ng boxing, may iba pa bang nagpapatuloy ng mga laro sa mga oras na ito?
Yes ho, Bombo Dennis, dito nga sa kinatatayuan natin, dito sa ating left side ay nagpapatuloy ho itong championship nga dito sa larong basketball. Kanina sa bronze medal game natin, tinalo ho ng itong Region 4B, itong Davao Region. So ang kasunod na laban ho, itong for gold medal na itong from NCR at saka 4A naman na Bombo Dennis.
Okay, kumusta naman yung lagay ng panahon dyan sa Marikina City sapagkat sa mga nakalipas na araw ay napakatindi ng challenge na pinagdaanan ng mga atleta dahil sinasabayan ng mga pagbuhos ng ulan. Ngayong huling araw, kumusta naman?
Sa ngayon, Bombo Dennis, maganda naman ho ang nakikita natin na weather. Pero kaso nga lang, may mga portion pa rin po dito na talagang may konti-konting na form na mga clouds, which means, Bombo Dennis, na posible pa rin na uulanin ho, lalong-lalo na itong closing ceremony natin, maya-maya po yan. So, pero sa ngayon, sa kasalukuyan, okay pa naman itong panahon. Yun nga lang, may konting hangin din, no? Na-feel din natin, Bombo Dennis, na bahagyang lumakas ang hangin ho sa mga oras na to, Bombo Dennis.
Okay, so anong oras sa Bombo Levy para maabangan ng ating mga taga-subaybay kung anong oras mangyayari yung mga programa dyan para doon sa closing program na, closing part na, ika nga, yung awarding dyan sa Palarong Pambansa 2023.
Okay, ang program proper ho natin ay mag-uumpisa 3 p.m. Pero ang pagdating ho ni VP Sara Duterte, which is siya din ho ang ating Education Secretary, ay 4 p.m. pa ho yan. And then yung speech niya, posibleng mag-last ho yan ng 5 p.m. At after that, Bombo Dennis at mga kabombo, yun na, yung mga pag-showcase natin ng ito nga sinasabi ng Department of Education din na mga drone activities. At may mga banda pa po na ating i-expect maya-maya po yan. Ito nga dito sa kasabayan ng closing ceremony nitong Palarong Pambansa 2023 dito sa Marikina City.
With that, maraming salamat, Bombo Levy. Mag-ingat kayo dyan.
Yan muna ang latest update mula rito sa lungsod ng Marikina. Ito si Bombo Levy de Leon para sa Palarong Pambansa 2023 update or coverage ng Bombo Radio Philippines, the #1 and most trusted radio network in the country. Basta Radio. Bombo!
Sa dagdag pang mga balita, nakapagtala ang Philippine Institute of Volcanology and Seismology ng 8 mga tectonic earthquakes sa Mount Bulusan. Pero ayon kay officer in charge ng Philippine Institute of Volcanology and Seismology na si Dr. Teresito Bacolcol, wala pang dapat ikabahala ang publiko ukol sa nasabing mga aktibidad. Batay kasi sa kanilang pinakahuling datos, bumaba na ang bilang ng mga naitatalang tectonic earthquake na hatid ng nasabing ng bulkan kung saan mula kahapon hanggang kaninang umaga ay umabot na lamang ito sa 4 na bilang. Gayunpaman, hindi naman inaalis ng mga opisyal ang posibilidad ng pagkakaroon ng phreatic eruptions sa mga susunod na araw. Paliwanag ng eksperto na ang phreatic eruption ay isang phenomenon kung saan tumatalsik ang tubig sa mainit na bagay na nagiging dahilan po ng naturang eruption o ito na tawag natin na phreatic eruption. Dahil sa madalas yan ng mga pag-ulan, malaki ang posibilidad na mangyayari ito. Tiniyak naman ng opisyal na patuloy nilang babantayan ang sitwasyon ng bulkang Bulusan upang kaagad maiakyat sa anumang alerto kung makikitaan ito ng mas malalang aktibidad. Sa kasalukuyan na natiling nasa alert level 0 ang bulkang Bulusan.
Ipinagutos naman ni Department of Environment and Natural Resources Secretary Antonia Yulo Loizaga ang revamp o kaya ipagbalasa, pagbabago doon sa mga namamahala sa mga regional offices nito. Yan ay kasunod na rin ng umano'y reklamo ukol sa inefficiency at complacency o kaya hindi epektibo na pamamahala ng ilan sa nasabing mga opisyal sa kanilang mga opisina. Dahil dito, asahan ang pagbabago sa liderato ng regional offices ng Department of Environment and Natural Resources na kinabibilangan ng Eastern Visayas at ng Zamboanga Peninsula at maging dyan sa Mimaropa Region, Northern Mindanao. Kasama na dito ang Environmental Management Bureau sa Central Luzon at Eastern Visayas Region. Apektado rin sa nasabing revamp ang iba pang mga provincial offices ng Department of Environment and Natural Resources. Ilan pang mga opisyal na papalitan ho sa mga nasabing rehiyon ay ang kanilang mga Regional Executive Director, Assistant Director at Provincial Environmental and Natural Resources Officers ng ilan pa sa mga probinsya sa ilalim ho ng mga nabanggit na rehiyon. Mismong si Secretary Loizaga ang nag-anunsyo sa mga nasabing pagbabago. Samantala, ang ilan naman sa mga opisyal na inalis mula sa ibang rehiyon ay dinala sa iba pang rehiyon din ng ating bansa.
Samantala, ibinid na naman ng Department of Transportation na operational na ang lahat ng mga train sets ng Metro Rail Transit Line 3. Ito ay matapos na makompleto na ang pag-overhaul sa 72 mga bagon ng nasabing railway mula noong Nobyembre ng nakalipas na taon. Ayon kay Department of Transportation Assistant Secretary for Railways Georgette Aquino, sa ngayon ay nasa 24 na mga train sets na ang available at operational. Aniya, sa pamagitan nito ay maaari na silang makapag-deploy ng dagdag na 2 o 3 train sets kung kinakailangan na kayang makapag-accommodate ng nasa 450,000 hanggang 500,000 na mga pasahero. Sa katunayan pa nito, nasa 18 train sets na raw ang tumatakbo kada peak hours na tumaas na ang ridership ng naturang railway ng hanggang 10 million kada buwan ngayong taon. Doble ang itinaas ito kumpara sa 5 milyong monthly ridership na naitala noong taong 2021 habang mas mataas ito kumpara sa 8 million ridership na naitala naman sa kada buwan noong taong 2022. Sa ngayon kasi, pumapalo na sa 375,000 hanggang 400,000 na average ang bilang ng mga pasaherong kanilang naitatala kada araw na nangangahulugan lamang na nadagdagan na muli ang bilang ng mga commuters na sumasakay sa Metro Rail Transit Line 3. Dagdag pa ng opisyal ay mas pinabilis din hanggang sa 60 kilometers per hour ang takbo ng mga tren nito na mayroong train intervals na aabot lamang hanggang sa 4 na minuto.
Samantala, umaasa ang Department of Finance na makakapag-ambag ang Philippine Amusement and Gaming Corporation ng hanggang 32.57 billion pesos sa susunod huya na taon. Ang nasabing projection ay halos doble kumpara ho doon sa kasalukuyang target ng Philippine Amusement and Gaming Corporation na 15.03 billion pesos. Ginawa ng Finance Department ang nasabing projection kasunod na rin ng magandang record umano ng naturang tanggapan sa kasalukuyang taon pagkatapos na rin ng ilang taon na nasa ilalim tayo ng pandemya. Sa unang kalahating bahagi pa lamang kasi ng 2023 ay nalagpasan na ng naturang tanggapan ang isang taon nitong target na nakakolekta naman ng 16 billion pesos. Ayon pa sa Department of Finance, tiyak na lalo pang tataas ang kikitain ng naturang tanggapan sa susunod na mga taon habang nasa momentum ito ng pagbangon mula sa labis na epekto ng nakalipas na pandemya. Gayunman, naniniwala ang nasabing kagawaran na hindi pa maaabot ng Philippine Amusement and Gaming Corporation ang pre-pandemic level na kinikita nito kahit sa pagsapit ng 2024. Ang target na 32.57 billion pesos kasi ay mananatiling mas mababa kumpara huyan sa 35.46 billion pesos na naging koleksyon noong taong 2019 o bago pa man nagsimula ang pag-iral ng pandemic.
Samantala, magsasagawa naman ng dredging at desilting operation ang Department of Public Works and Highways sa 3 malalaking ilog sa bansa. Ito nga ay nagiging pangunahing dahilan ng mga pagbaha sa maraming mga komunidad sa ating bansa. Kinaibilangan ito ng Pasig River dito sa Metro Manila, sa Pampanga River sa Central Luzon at ang Dimagla River sa Nueva Ecija na dumadaloy din sa malaking bahagi ng Central Luzon. Ayon kay Public Works Secretary Manuel Bonoan, ayaw na makakatulong ang gagawing operasyon upang mabawasan ng labis na pagbaha sa iba't ibang bahagi ng bansa. Ang Pampanga River ay ang pangalawa sa pinakamalaking ilog sa Central Luzon na dumadaloy mula Pampanga, Bulacan at Nueva Ecija. At ayon pa sa naturang ahensya, labis na umaangat ang tubig nito dahil sa mababaw na ang nasabing ilog at wala rin umanong mga kahoy na sumisipsip sa tubig. Ang Dimagla River naman ay ang ilog na nagpapabaha sa maraming komunidad sa Nueva Ecija. Sa inisyal na plano ng ahensya, 4.4 kilometers ng nasabing ilog ang nais nilang matanggalan ng silt material o mga basura at lupang naitambak sa ilalim na nasabing ilog. Para sa Pasig River naman, ang desilting operation dito ay pagpapatuloy lamang ng nauna ng dredging operation na ginagawa sa nasabing ilog. Ayon kay Secretary Bonoan, kakailanganin nila ang tulong ng mga lokal na pamahalaan para maging matagumpay ang planong paghuhukay at paglilinis sa mga naturang ilog.
Ako na muna tayo dyan sa Bicol Region dahil may mga nahukay na vintage bomb ang mga otoridad. Alamin natin ang mga update hatid ng Bombo Radio Legazpi.
Nagpadala na ng Explosive Ordnance Disposal Unit ang Philippine Army sa construction site sa Barangay San Francisco, Bulan, Sorsogon matapos na makahukay ng 5 vintage bomb sa lugar. Sa panayam na Bombo Radio Legazpi kay 9th Infantry Division Public Affairs Office Chief Major Frank Roldan, Hulyo 27 ng unang makadiskubri ng isang vintage bomb sa tinatapos na kampo ng militar sa lugar. Subalit ngayong linggo naman ang muling makahukay ng 4 na mga lumang bomba sa lugar. Ayon kay Roldan, maingat na kinuha ng Explosive Ordnance Disposal Unit ang mga vintage bomb lalo't may posibilidad pa itong sumabog kahit matagal nang nakabaon sa lupa. Nakatagda itong dalhin sa ligtas na lugar na malayo sa kabahayan upang i-dispose o pasabugin na. Napatida noong World War II, ginamit ng mga sundalong Hapon ng lugar bilang kanilang kampo kung kaya hindi nakatakataka na may mga nadidiskubring bomba dito. Samantala, tumutulong na ngayon ang Explosive Ordnance Disposal Unit sa pag-inspeksyon sa lugar upang makatulong sakaling muling makahukay na bomba.
Sa ngayon patuloy yung pag-paneling, pag-searching ng ating mga otoridad para matiyak yung seguridad ng mga nakatira malapit doon kasi although nakadistansya naman ito doon sa kabahayan pero malapit ito doon sa sa sementeryo.
Bagay na rin payag ni 9th Infantry Division Public Affairs Office Chief Major Frank Roldan. Yan ang ulat mula rito sa Bombo Radio Legazpi para sa Bombo Network News. Bombo Romeo Belardo Jr. para sa number 1 na most trusted radio network in the country, Bombo Radio Philippines, Basta Radio. Bombo!
Samantala, yung mga pulis na umano'y nagpapagamit doon sa issue ng bangayan ng uminala dumanhog political tension ay pinaiimbestigahan ni Philippine National Police Chief Acorda. May pag-uulat ang Bombo Radio Cagayan de Oro.
Pinapasagot mismo ni Philippine National Police General Benjamin Acorda Jr. ang kanyang ilang pulis na bahagi ng Incident Command System ng Misamis Occidental Provincial Government na pursahang nagpaalis kay suspended Bonifacio Mayor Samson Dumanhog.
Ito ay matapos binaliwalaw manon sagutin ni Bonifacio Police Station Commander Police Major Rachel Sumagang at maging ng kanyang Deputy Commander na si Police Captain Mark Bienes ang mga tawag ni Akurda upang alamin ang kaguluhan habang ipinapatupad ang forced pull-out kay dumanhog sa akusasyon na usurpation of authority. Nabulgar ito nang humarap sa Senate Committee on Public Order and Dangerous Drugs hearing ni Senator Ronald Bato de la Rosa, ang isang Attorney General Gallego na tinawagan si Akurda para sa nasabing usapin. Paliwanag naman ni Sumagang at maging ni Misamis Occidental PNP Provincial Director Colonel Marlon Kimno na mahirap sila makasagot sa kanilang cellphones dahil kinumpiska ito ng ICS para hindi sisingaw ang umano'y impormasyon ukol sa operasyon.
General Acorda, do you confirm that this conversation with Attorney Gallego took place?
Yes, Your Honor, because it appears everybody is afraid to talk with me. It's only...
Ano ang pulis? Dinisarmahan ng cellphone ng sibilyan? Mabuti ka, mabait ka pa na CPNP. If I were na CPNP tapos ganon, hindi ako kausapin ng tao ko, lilipad ako right there and then. Ano ka na kahina, General Acorda? Di mo kayang hawakan yung organisasyon mo?
No, sir, that's why I subjected for investigation and the IDM was properly instructed after that incident, sir, Your Honor.
Mula Bombo Radio Cagayan de Oro, Bombo Junil Ukat para sa number 1 at most trusted radio network in the country, Bombo Radio Philippines. Basta Radio, Bombo!
Mga lider ng 6 na pangunahing relihiyon sa buong mundo nagsama-sama sa pambihirang pagkakataon sa isang seremonya kasabay ng pagdiriwang ng World Youth Day sa Portugal. Yan ang pag-uulat ng Bombo Radio Iloilo.
Sa pambihirang pagkakataon, nagsama-sama ang mga lider ng 6 na pangunahing relihiyon sa buong mundo sa isinagawang seremonya kasabay ng World Youth Day sa Lisbon, Portugal. Sa isang multi-faith tree planting ceremony sa Tropical Botanical Garden of the University of Lisbon, nakibahagi ang mga kinatawan ng Islam, Budismo, Taoismo, Judaismo, Hinduismo at Kristyanismo. Sumisimbolo ito sa panawagan ni His Holiness Pope Francis para sa pangangalaga sa kalikasan, pagkakaisa at kapayapaan sa pagitan ng mga relihiyon. Ayon naman kay Father Luan Torrefranca, ang chairman ng Commission on Youth ng Diocese of Bacolod, na kabilang din sa Philippine Delegation sa Portugal, ang World Youth Day ay naging buhay na patotoo sa pananampalataya sa Panginoon na walang pinipiling kulay ng balat o lahi sapagkat ang pagmamahal ng Diyos ay para sa lahat.
Different races, different peoples, different languages, no? All of the skins, all of us are being gathered in the name of Jesus. The faith is very much alive. For the message, and I think also my reflection, I just like to quote the words of Pope Francis that he kept on repeating during his speech. He was saying that God loves us. He calls us by name because He loves us.
Si Reverend Father Luan Torrefranca para sa Bombo Network News. Ito si Bombo Ayan Kahete para sa number 1 and most trusted radio network in the country, Bombo Radio Philippines. Basta Radio, Bombo!
Bombo International News.
Aabot sa 11 katao ang hindi na nakaligtas pa mula sa gumuho o pagguho ng lupa sa isang mountain resort sa Chovy, Georgia. Ayon sa Ministry of Internal Affairs, ang Racha Region, ang nasabing bansa ang isa sa mga pinakanapinsala ng nasabing landslide. Makikita rin sa isang drone footage na nakalap ng mga otoridad na binalot ng putik ang mga punong kahoy at marami pang iba sa nasabing lugar. Samantala, sa kabila nito ay iniulat din ng mga otoridad na sa ngayon ay 12 na pa ng mga individual ang napaulat na nawawala, habang kasalukuyan pa rin ng mga nagpapatuloy ang isinasagawang search and rescue operations ng mga kinaukulan hinggil sa nasabing pangyayari.
Bombo Sports News.
Kinumpirma ng Los Angeles Lakers ang pagpirma ni Anthony Davis ng extension na contract na magtatagal ho ng hanggang 2028. Ang nasabing kontrata ay nagkakahalaga ng $186 million o katumbasuyan ng 10.33 billion pesos. Ang nasabing extension ang magsisilbing pinakamalaking annual extension deal sa kasaysayan ng National Basketball Association. Sa ilalim kasi ng naturang deal, sasahod itong si Davis ng $62 million kada taon. Maalalang si Davis ang naging katandem ni NBA superstar LeBron James nang mapanalunan ng mga ito ang 2020 NBA Championship nitong nakalipas na taon at siya ay may average na 25.9 points, 12.5 rebounds at 2.6 assists, 2.0 blocks at 1.1 steals. Hawak din ito ang magandang shooting percentage na 56% sa pagpirma ni Davis sa nasabing kontrata. Muli nitong makakasama sa mga susunod na taon si LeBron James para naman sa posibleng panibagong championship run ng kanilang kupunan. Maalalang muling pumasok sa Western Conference Championship ang Lakers nitong nakalipas na taon, ngunit hindi sila pinalad matapos ma-sweep ng 2023 NBA champion na Denver Nuggets. Luzon, Visayas at Mindanao, yan ang kalipunan ng mga balita para sa pantanghaling edisyon ng Bombo Network News. Mula sa Bombo News Center para sa #1 and most trusted radio network in the country, Bombo Radio Philippines. Basta Radio, Bombo!
Init! Yak! Lagkit mo! Baka may germs din yan. New Safeguard Extra Strong Cooling. Tanggal lagkit at germs. Extra Strong Cooling. Ooh! Lamig ng feeling! Safeguard.
Tonight, a defiant former president.
I think it's going great. I think it's a rigged deal here.
Donald Trump is fingerprinted, arraigned, and charged with multiple indictments, but that has not stopped him from his White House pursuit as he wages his own defense. Plus,
what we are witnessing today is the blatant and unapologetic weaponization of the criminal justice system.
Donald Trump's supporters called for protests in the streets following his indictments, and they were out in force as his own spokesperson came out fighting against what they say is a political attack against the former president. And the seismic shifts Trump's charges are having on the 2024 campaign trail as his own Republican opponents are coming out against him, even as others are promising pardons. Good evening, everyone. I'm Lindsay Davis. Thank you so much for streaming with us. It is a historic prosecution that Donald Trump is calling a persecution. We begin tonight with this poignant moment in American history. A former president in court today facing criminal charges from the very government he was once elected to lead. Today, Trump entered a plea of not guilty to a sprawling 37-count criminal indictment. Traveling to the Miami courthouse alone this afternoon, Trump was seen waving out of the car window. The former president was fingerprinted, but no mugshot was taken. Then, for the first time, Trump came face-to-face with special counsel Jack Smith. Magistrate Judge Jonathan Goodman, who oversaw the hearing, ordered Trump not to discuss the case with any witnesses. Outside of the court, there was a festive atmosphere. Most of the hundreds who showed up were there to support Trump, while others were there in protest. So what comes next as this historic legal showdown plays out in the middle of the 2024 campaign season? Our team is standing by to break it all down tonight, and we begin with our senior congressional correspondent, Rachel Scott, in Miami.
Donald Trump this morning walking to his motorcade at his Doral resort. The former president riding alone. A brief wave to supporters and a post on social media. On my way to the courthouse, witch hunt. Outside federal court in Miami, a carnival-like atmosphere. Small groups of supporters and opponents, present but peaceful. Inside, Trump was arrested, fingerprinted electronically, but no mugshot, no handcuffs. He was not ordered to empty his pockets. In the courtroom, the former president found himself just steps away from the man prosecuting him, Special Counsel Jack Smith, who he has attacked in deeply personal terms. Smith sitting just one row behind Trump. Glancing at the former president throughout the hearing, Trump never once looked back. Smith charging Trump with 37 criminal counts, accusing him of illegally keeping sensitive classified documents at his Mar-a-Lago resort, in a storage area, a ballroom, even a bathroom. They allegedly included secrets about United States nuclear programs, potential vulnerabilities of the United States and its allies to military attack, and plans for possible retaliation in response to a foreign attack. Prosecutors argue Trump tried to obstruct the investigation by suggesting his attorney hide or destroy documents, allegedly asking the lawyer, wouldn't it be better if we just told them we don't have anything here? In court today, Trump saying not one word. His shoulders slumped, his arms crossed, his face stern. His lawyer entering his plea, not guilty. Sitting at the same table as the former president, one of his closest aides, Walt Nauta, who has also been charged, allegedly conspiring with his boss to obstruct the investigation. Nauta at Trump's side over the weekend. He rode in the motorcade today. But at the end of the hearing, the magistrate judge ordered Trump not to discuss the case with any potential witnesses, a group that would certainly include Nauta. After about an hour in the courthouse, Trump and Nauta leaving together, stopping at a Cuban restaurant in Little Havana.
Food for everyone. Food for everyone.
Trump sounding upbeat as he headed to the airport.
I think it's going great. Okay, I think it's a rigged deal here.
And with one final wave, he was off.
We'll be seeing a lot more of him for sure. Rachel Scott joins us now from Miami. Rachel, you were inside that courtroom today. We only have the sketches, but I have to imagine that it was quite a striking scene for you to witness with your own eyes.
It was unprecedented, Lindsay. We have never seen anything like this before. And one thing that was striking, the special counsel Jack Smith repeatedly glancing over at former President Donald Trump. Trump never once turned around to look back at him. The former president did not utter a single word, but he did not have to. His arms were crossed, his shoulders were slumped. He had to wait about 15 minutes for the judge to start today's arraignment. And at times he appeared restless, even fidgeting with his hands. One thing was very clear. Trump was ready to get this all over with and get back to his 2024 campaign, Lindsay.
Rachel Scott, our thanks to you. And now let's get right to ABC's senior investigative reporter Aaron Katursky. Aaron, what are the next steps for Trump here?
Imagine the judge will set one soon to start to lay out a motion schedule as the lawyers make their arguments. You could imagine former President Trump's legal team is already thinking about motions to dismiss the case or diminish the charges, maybe throw out certain evidence. We'll also see what the judge decides to do in terms of keeping the case here in downtown Miami or maybe moving it to Fort Pierce, north of here, where she usually is based. So there's all sorts of different machinations, but it's unlikely, Lindsay, we're going to see former President Trump in this courthouse again anytime soon, maybe not until trial, assuming the case gets that far.
And Aaron, today Trump was also dealt a second legal blow. What are the details on that?
Really stunning because it really underscores, Lindsay, just how many legal entanglements the former president is facing. As he was being arraigned on the indictment here in Miami, a federal judge in New York allowed E. Jean Carroll to amend an existing defamation lawsuit to include more comments that Trump made that were allegedly disparaging to her. These comments came after a jury found Trump liable of sexually assaulting Carroll back in the 1990s. He went on CNN, he went online, he made all these remarks. And now her lawsuit is going to include those remarks and seek $10 million in damages. So as he's fighting a criminal case, he also has civil lawsuits to tend to as well, Lindsay.
Aaron Katursky, our thanks to you as always. We turn now to ABC senior justice correspondent Pierre Thomas. And Pierre, special counsel Jack Smith didn't have to be in the courtroom today. This was a choice. There he was, seated one row behind Donald Trump. What does that signal?
Dramatic move. He clearly wanted to indicate to the president, I'm here. I'm the person who personally brought this case against you, and I stand by it. He also was making a statement to his staff. I support you. It's a long road ahead. You have a case to prosecute. There could be threats involved with all of this. I support you as well.
By all accounts, we've heard that Trump was stoic, obviously didn't utter a word inside that courtroom. Are you getting a sense that he really realizes the seriousness of these charges?
Listen, I don't know how he couldn't. He faces decades in prison if convicted. We're talking about 37 counts here. As his legal threats go, this is the most serious case that he faces, period. These are federal cases, federal felonies, and we have a situation. This case is brought by some of the best investigators at the FBI and by the Department of Justice, the full weight of the Department of Justice.
Our senior justice correspondent, Pierre Thomas, our thanks to you as always. Good to have you in studio.
Pleasure.
And now let's head back to Miami, where Victor Oquendo is at the iconic Cuban restaurant Versailles. Victor, Trump headed straight there right after his arraignment. How big of a political power play was this for him?
Lindsay, this is the most well-known Cuban restaurant in Miami. For political candidates, it is a must-stop. This place has been in business for over 50 years. Typically what you'll see is they'll come by here to this window, La Ventanita, and they'll place an order of Cuban coffee and some pastries, but it's also in the heart of the Cuban exile community. Still a little loud around here, as you can tell. It's a logical stopping point for the former president. He had a lot of supporters here to greet him, and at one point, a group of them even formed a prayer circle around him. Lindsay?
And as we hear the horns honking there, aside from that, what's the atmosphere there like now, hours after his departure?
Yeah, Lindsay, for the most part, I'd say it is back to business as usual here at Versailles, focusing on their dinner rush. But I should mention that as campaign season really ramps up here, it's really just a matter of time until another candidate stops by here. Lindsay?
And just curious, Victor, have you gotten a chance to talk to anybody who was there when Trump was there? And were they excited? How did they describe the atmosphere?
Yeah, I can tell you they were definitely excited, which is the same thing that we saw when we were outside of the federal courthouse today. The atmosphere there felt more like a rally, which is pretty surprising given the severity of what was happening inside. Here, I can tell you that those who are still here when the former president came by, they were just excited to see him, thrilled to have a moment with the former president. Lindsay?
Really interesting there. All right, Victor Oquendo, our thanks to you. And let's head now to Mary Bruce, watching this all play out all day long from the White House. Mary, the White House didn't make any comments when the arraignment came out. Have they said anything today?
No, Lindsay, the president is actually going out of his way not to comment on this repeatedly today, ignoring reporters' shouted questions on this. The president is well aware that Trump and his supporters are trying to claim that this is all politically motivated. And Biden, we are told, wants to protect the independence of the Justice Department, fearful that if he weighs in one way or another, that it could be construed as him somehow trying to influence this and cause some to question the integrity of the investigation, Lindsay.
But despite the president staying silent, his wife, First Lady Dr. Jill Biden, did make some remarks. What did she have to say?
Yeah, the First Lady is weighing in. She was speaking behind closed doors at a private fundraiser in New York last night, and she said she thinks it's a little shocking that Republicans don't seem to care about the indictment. She was referencing recent polling that shows that Trump supporters are not wavering here. It is perhaps a sign that the Biden campaign is frustrated about all of this for sure. But the big question now, Lindsay, is just how long can Biden and his campaign stay silent on this, and when will they go on the attack? Lindsay.
Mary Bruce from the White House for us. Thanks so much, Mary.
Thank you.
For more on this, let's bring in ABC News contributor and former FBI agent Asha Rangappa, now an assistant dean at Yale's Jackson School of Global Affairs. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Looking at these charges, I just want you to give us a sense of how strong of a case the Justice Department has laid out in their 37-count indictment, keeping in mind that former U.S. Attorney General William Barr called it an egregious obstruction. Even if half of it is true, he said he is toast. Very, very damning. What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's a very strong indictment. So on the Espionage Act charges, the 31 documents that are each one count for each document that's in there, that has to be national defense information. That is a part of the violation, to willfully retain that and not give it up when an official comes and asks for it. And we see that this is clearly national defense information. It's nuclear secrets. It's our military strategy. So I think that part they definitely have down. On the obstruction and false statements, they have very hard evidence. They have audio tapes, they have text messages, they have photographs that will all come to, going to the intent to conceal and prevent the FBI from getting this. This really gets to the heart of the obstruction, because the hardest element to prove there is the intent. And here you have it in words and recordings.
And you really touched on this, but I'd like you to go a little further, put like a little bit of a sharper point on it. When we look at the types of classified documents at the center of these charges, how significant is it that so many of these documents are related to military matters and even about nuclear weapons? How does that impact the case?
It impacts the case not only because they meet the elements of the crime. It's clearly national defense information, but it's also going to be compelling to a jury. What Jack Smith has done is taken really sensitive documents. These aren't, confidential documents that people might wonder, hey, why is this classified? A jury will understand why these had to be protected, what risk was there by, putting them out there so cavalierly, by not returning them to the government. So there is, I think, a jury appeal to the particular documents. I'll add that there were 13 top secret documents that were recovered in this whole saga that weren't used. And I think it's important to emphasize that they weren't used likely because they couldn't risk disclosing them in the course of a trial in any way, which means that the sensitivity of the items that were at Mar-a-Lago was likely even greater than what we see in the indictment itself.
That's really interesting to note there. And let's talk about one specific piece of evidence, and that's the audio recording of the former president talking about some of those classified documents in his possession, where he reportedly says, as president, I could have declassified it. Now I can't, but this is still a secret. Is that a potential smoking gun?
It's a smoking gun in terms of undercutting or dismissing the kinds of defenses that Trump will want to make and that we've seen him make in the court of public opinion. So one is, for example, that he had nothing to do with the packing of these documents, that he didn't know what was there, that, he's the former president of the United States. There's a lot of people who do this. This shows that he knew he possessed classified information. The second defense we've seen him trot out is that he declassified these before he left, that somehow magically he did this on his own without telling anyone. Well, this audio recording suggests that he knows that these are still classified, that he did not classify them, and that he understands that there was a procedure that needed to be followed in order to declassify it. So this really cabins the kinds of defenses that I think he's going to make, which is why the special counsel included that recording in the indictment.
We know that dozens of former Trump aides, as well as Secret Service agents, have testified before the grand jury. What does that tell us about the scope of information that the special prosecutor has been gathering about the former president's handling of those classified documents?
Well, the special counsel is going to have a number of people who are around President Trump every day. The Secret Service follows him around. In many ways, he's basically had federal law enforcement officers watching him potentially commit federal crimes that now are duty bound by their role to have to provide this. These aren't people who can litigate and stonewall. This is a part of their job to testify, to report crimes that they see. And so the special counsel is going to have a lot of credible evidence. But I think also the compelling evidence here is just the receipts in terms of the text exchanges and in the lawyer notes from Trump's own lawyers, which documented Trump's attempts to stonewall and try to hide the documents from the FBI and the Department of Justice. All of this together is going to be incredibly damning.
Given that so many people are paying attention to this timeline because of he's still the top contender on the Republican side for the 2024 presidential campaign, give us a sense of what you can expect timing-wise and as far as the strategy on both sides as this case moves forward.
Yes, I would think of this as the end of one journey and the beginning of another. We're used to watching Law and Order, where we go from investigation to conviction in an hour, and that's just not how it works. The investigation phase has ended, but the trial phase, or this phase until trial, is going to take a long time, not only because of the pretrial motions that were mentioned previously by Aaron, but also because this is a national security case. So it's going to involve a statute called the Classified Information Procedures Act, CIPA. And this involves a lot of back and forth about how to treat the classified information in terms of disclosing it and turning it over to the defendant. This is a public trial. The defendant is entitled to have the defense, the evidence against him. And of course, this gets complicated, this tension between defendants' rights and national security in this type of case. So that itself will take a lot of pretrial motions. And I suspect that this trial will not start until well into the campaign season. It's not clear to me whether it would even start or be concluded before the election.
Wow. All right. Asha Rangappa, our thanks to you for your insight and knowledge on all of this. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
And now let's bring in former Republican Congresswoman Barbara Comstock. She joins us now for reaction to today's charges. This day has been predicted for some time now, but now that it's happened, what's your reaction?
Well, it certainly is something, with Donald Trump, you sort of have defined deviancy down, so nothing surprises you. But I do think you're starting to see Republicans, particularly some of those on the campaign trail, certainly Chris Christie, Asa Hutchinson, but also, you saw Tim Scott separate themselves from defending Trump in some ways. And you also saw Senate Republicans say they weren't going to defend it and that these were serious charges. So, and then you also saw people, even those usual defenders, say on Fox News, Britt Hume, Jonathan Turley, who is one of those legal defenders of Donald Trump usually, who said, no, we can't defend this. And certainly former Attorney General Bill Barr has been very vociferous in saying this is indefensible and that he thought Donald Trump is toast. So I do think you're seeing Republican voices starting to separate themselves from defending Donald Trump. Even though you do have many House members defending them, I do think there are more and more
moving away. And as more of the details come forward, I think you may see more of that.
Well, I'm curious to really follow up on that because of two numbers that we have here. When we look at should Trump have been charged, 48%. So we're talking about nearly half of those who were polled said yes, right? But then when you look at the question of are those charges politically motivated, again, nearly half of people, so 47%. I'm curious, when you talk about Republicans who are moving away from Donald Trump, I mean, for nearly half of the people polled to say that they think that this was politically motivated, I don't know that that jives with the idea that Republicans are moving away.
Well, I think these days, all of these things are seen as political. You know, you still have Republicans who think this isn't fair because they want to say, you know, why wasn't Hillary Clinton charged or why isn't Joe Biden charged? But I do think because of the particular charges here, listen, I worked with Evan Corcoran, the lawyer here that Donald Trump tried to get to lie basically about these documents. The lawyer who, you know, as you read this and see that he tried to get him to hide the documents and, you know, participate in this fraud with him. And when Evan, who I know to be a good person, said, no, I won't participate in this, then he, you know, Donald Trump then participated in this fraud and hid the documents from Evan so that Evan couldn't find them. And then, you know, he was trying to get Evan or other lawyers to certify that the documents, you know, all had been gone through. So I think as people find these kind of facts out, it does become difficult for Republicans to defend that type of behavior, which is very unique. Now, that doesn't mean they don't think that it's partisan, but I do think this particular fact pattern you know, when you delve into it and get that kind of detail, realize that Donald Trump's own lawyer that's the person who's testifying against him. And when you realize, again and again, the lawyers who worked for Donald Trump, just like in the past, his campaign managers, his own family, people, who had to testify against him, on January 6th matters, you realize that, Donald Trump engages in a lot of indefensible behavior.
Former Republican Congresswoman Barbara Comstock, we thank you so much for your time. Always appreciate you coming on the show.
Thank you.
And joining us now for more is Republican presidential hopeful and former Arkansas Governor Asa Hutchinson. Governor, thanks so much for your time tonight.
It's good to be with you. Thank you.
So you're a former federal prosecutor. Obviously, this is an unprecedented case as we continue to describe it that way. You've now had the opportunity to read the indictment. Do you think that federal prosecutors have a strong case?
I do. Whenever you look at the specificity that's laid out in the indictment, it's a very strong case. Obviously, this is going to have to be tried. You've got to prove all of that. But as Bill Barr said, if half of that is proved, then it's a very devastating case that's being presented against the former president. I'm very pleased that there's been more Republican leaders step up and say, this is serious, we're not going to dismiss this lightly, particularly when you have servicemen and women that are held to the same standard and are held accountable if they violate that. And so this is a serious matter, both for the criminal justice system, but also for selecting the future leader of the country. And so I'm delighted that more leaders are showing courage and saying this is serious and we should not dismiss it lightly.
Do you have any idea if this case would have the likelihood that it would be decided before the 2024 election or before the primary season?
Well, I've actually tried cases in which classified information was involved, and it does add a level of complexity because you have to have the clearances, you have to have the protection as you exchange the information as you get ready for trial. And so it is more complex than normal. But I hope that the judges and the courts understand that you have to be fair to the defendant, give them the right to prepare, but at the same time there's extraordinary public interest for our nation in getting this issue resolved in a timely fashion. The Speedy Trial Act applies not just to protect the defendant, but it also applies to give the public protection and assurance that justice is not going to be delayed. And so I think that it's going to continue through the campaign season. You're going to be looking at debates in August. You're going to be looking at primaries next year. And former President Trump is likely to have court appearances during that time. It'll be interesting to see whether the court's trying to accommodate his campaign schedule or whether they're going to insist upon compliance with the court schedule and a timely hearing of this case.
What do you think about some of the fellow Republicans who are also running for president, who are promising pardons for President Trump, former President Trump? Do you feel that that's appropriate?
It is wrong. It is unjustified. It is a bad precedent. They're politically pandering to get votes using the federal pardon power. So no, it incenses me as somebody who's had to use the pardon power as governor and respects that power as president, and you don't use it as a campaign wedge issue or a campaign tool. So I'm offended by that as someone who loves our justice system in America, and it's wrong for candidates to be promising that, whether it's to a former president or whether it's to an average Joe that's out there. You just don't do that during a campaign. I want our candidates to show more courage and to speak out about this and provide leadership.
Trump currently, as you well know, remains the front runner for the 2024 nomination on the Republican side. You've called on him to drop out of the race. That does not appear that would be likely at all. But would you support him if he is nominated?
Well, I'm not going to support somebody who's convicted of a felony, particularly one as involving the secrets of the United States. That's not reflective of who our commander-in-chief should be and our national character and the high regard that we have for our military and those that collect these secrets. And so we'll see how the debate develops and how the case develops. And I'm not going to be supporting somebody who is convicted or who has wrongfully handled material that jeopardizes the security of the United States.
Governor, is that to say that you would support him if he is not convicted?
Well, I don't expect him to be the nominee, and I want to be on the debate stage, so I expect that we're going to be negotiating this language to assure that there's not going to be a circumstance that we're bound to support somebody who is convicted of a very serious felony that violates the high office of president and the handling of classified material. That's very important for our country, and no candidate should take that lightly. So let's see how that develops. But I want to be on that debate stage, and I hope there's that opportunity. We've also got to have 40,000 donors. And so I hope everybody goes to asa2024.com. Helps me to get on that debate stage.
Just want to take one more swing at it, Governor. You would consider, if he's not convicted, supporting him?
I'm going to look at what we have to do, what the language of that is. I haven't seen the language of the pledge yet, so that's still under negotiation. And I hope it's something that I can live with because I want to be on the debate stage, but there's certain principles you don't cross.
There are at least 12 candidates currently in the race. Are you worried that this is 2016 all over again, too many candidates, and that your participation in the race would only allow Trump to become the nominee should you drop out?
Well, people understand who Donald Trump is. I think the fact that there's 11 other candidates in the race reflect that there's a lot of leaders that want a different nominee than Donald Trump, and we want to beat Joe Biden, and he's not the right one to do it. So there's almost a unanimity in that message. As far as the number, that's going to sort out over time. That's what Iowa sorts out. That's what New Hampshire does. As I talked to the voters in New Hampshire most recently, they're telling me this is serious. They believe that it is political and a double standard here, but they also treat it as very serious and something that they're not taking lightly and will be a factor as they make their decision going into the primary and caucus season.
Presidential hopeful and Governor Asa Hutchinson, we thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate you coming on the show.
Thank you. Good to be with you.
Now I'd like to bring in ABC's John Santucci, who's reported on Donald Trump since he first ran for the White House back in 2015. Always good to have you here.
Nice to be
Whenever
with you.
you're here, though, it is not a good day for Donald Trump.
What are you trying to say, Lindsay?
But seeing him leave the courthouse and then go right to that restaurant in Florida, I mean, that seemed like classic playbook for Donald Trump.
Well, to a degree, right? I mean, playbook in the sense that, you know, he quickly wants to pivot a moment, but not classic in the sense that those are stops he doesn't typically enjoy. He doesn't like doing the glad handing. He doesn't love going to the diners or restaurants or things like that. I remember the first time that he did it in 2015. He actually looked at the press that followed him and said, what am I supposed to do? I mean, he's not comfortable in those moments. But clearly, though, as we've been reporting, he wants to very quickly pivot away from this, right? Delay this case as much as humanly possible. Get back on the campaign trail. And really, the campaign is going to be that this is a case that's being built, though against him, he's going to say they're doing it to come at his supporters.
And you obviously have a direct line to the Trump ensemble there. What are you hearing with regard to his response to today's charges?
You know, the word everybody keeps using with me is defiant. They say he's calm. They say actually that trip put him in a good mood. He was buoyed by the fact there were so many people there cheering his name. We know he loves that adulation part of things. But, you know, I think the imagery that our colleagues Olivia Rubin and Rachel Scott described from court, you know, we know that's weighing on Donald Trump. You know, Donald Trump's body language is very revealing. Him sitting there, arms crossed, not looking around, the tenseness of it all, it plays right into what I've been hearing, which is fits of anger for the last couple of days. These charges weighing on him, reading through that indictment, seeing how many people told the story that ultimately got Donald Trump charged, including Donald Trump.
John Santucci, always appreciate your wisdom and insight. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Lindsay.
And we still have much more to get to here on Prime tonight. Coming up, nearly 24 troops injured overseas. We'll tell you where. But next, tired of feeling like, remember that old Tupac rap line, trying to make $1 out of 15 cents? We update you on our nation's inflation.
Whenever news breaks,
the crushing families here in Poland.
Here in Kentucky, no match for the tornado.
From Monterey Park, California, on the ground in Ukraine.
Reporting from Uvalde, Texas, ABC News Live is right there everywhere.
From the scene of that deadly missile strike in Dnipro, Ukraine.
Reporting from the earthquake in Turkey.
From Charleston, South Carolina, on the 2024 campaign trail.
From Kathmandu, Nepal.
Truckee, California, covering record snowfall.
Traveling with the president in Mexico City.
Wherever the story.
Here at this airport in Tampa, it's already shut down.
Reporting from the nurses on the picket line.
Reporting from Jerusalem.
Here at 10 Downing Street in London. Streaming live to you.
Wherever the story is.
Wherever the story is.
Wherever the story is, we're going to take you there.
You're streaming ABC News Live.
ABC News Live.
You're streaming ABC News Live. ABC News Live. Streaming free everywhere. America's #1 streaming news.
With so much happening these days, it's hard to keep up.
Things change hour by hour, minute by minute.
The historic weather that's now unfolding.
The worries on Wall Street.
We're bringing you the Right Now. But a nationwide teacher shortage.
The Right Now look at the day ahead. An alert this morning for dog owners and the key takeaways from the biggest stories.
World News Now and America This Morning, America's #1 early morning news.
Today does feel a little different. Early mornings on ABC News Live.
All right, here we go. You ready? Let's do it. Yes, it's the show America wants and America needs right now. This is What Would You Do? Let's go. How are you? Yes. So what will you be watching Saturdays on ABC News Live? What would you do?
Hey, I guess I just found out.
The What Would You Do Marathon, 2 to 6 Eastern, every Saturday on ABC News Live.
My favorite show.
Welcome back, everyone. Donald Trump's historic federal arraignment has been front and center today, and we will go back to that in a few moments. But now some other major headlines that we're following across the country. Crews are working around the clock in Philadelphia to clean up that highway collapse caused by a fuel tank truck that exploded on an underpass. And tonight we are seeing new video of the moments of the crash. ABC's Janae Norman has the latest.
Tonight, as crews demolish what remains of that fire-damaged I-95 overpass, investigators are reviewing this new video showing the moment the fire ignited as they try to determine what caused that tanker truck hauling gasoline to crash and explode in a fireball under the overpass early Sunday. Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg getting a first-hand look at the destruction today, vowing to rebuild fast.
The only thing that's even more important than making sure it's restored quickly is making sure it's restored safely.
Experts say that inferno likely reached far greater temperatures than the 932 degrees that could cause steel in the overpass to lose a significant amount of its strength. Officials say it could take months to rebuild this overpass. Business owners say the collapse costing them customers.
I'm losing a lot of money, and government should take action quick and do something because it's not just me.
The economic impact likely to be felt far from the collapse site. And Lindsay, Secretary Buttigieg says shipping costs could go up on the East Coast as trucks take longer detours to avoid the collapse. Officials here plan to announce their plans to redo that overpass tomorrow. Lindsay.
Janae, thank you. Overseas, 22 U.S. soldiers were injured in a military helicopter accident in Syria. The Pentagon says no enemy fire was reported, but 15 of the injured have been evacuated for higher care. Here's ABC's James Longman.
Tonight, the U.S. military says it's investigating a helicopter mishap that's left 22 U.S. service members injured in northeastern Syria.
This was an MH-47 Chinook that had a problem with one rotor that caused a hard landing.
The U.S. military says no enemy fire was reported at the time. The incident Sunday left service members with injuries of various degrees, according to U.S. Central Command. A U.S. official tells ABC News 15 were transferred to a military hospital in Germany.
As of right now, all of the service members involved in that crash are in stable condition.
This comes after officials ordered a 24-hour stand-down of all aviation units back in April to focus on safety protocols. That order followed 3 helicopter crashes since February that killed 14 service members. There are roughly 900 U.S. soldiers in Syria right now, helping partner forces in the fight against ISIS. Lindsay, the investigation into what caused this crash is ongoing. U.S. troops in Syria and Iraq helped with 38 missions against ISIS in May alone. Lindsay?
James, thank you. Data released today shows that U.S. inflation may be leaving the sky-high days behind. Consumer prices rose 4% last month compared to a year ago. That's the slowest annual pace since March of 2021 and slightly better than expected. The fresh data comes a day before the Federal Reserve meets to announce its latest rate decision and bolsters hopes that the Fed may pause its rate hiking campaign. Next tonight to the severe weather for 16 million Americans from Texas to Florida. We've seen damaging winds, massive hail, and an isolated tornado. And tonight there's a heat wave brewing with temperatures over 100 degrees possible in some places. Our chief meteorologist, Ginger Z, is tracking it all. Hey, Ginger.
Hey there. You know, Lindsay, we've already had a reported tornado in Stratford, Texas. We've had tennis ball-sized hail from Pecan Hill, Texas, which is just south of Dallas, over to Shreveport. So you're going to see more of that big hail tonight. The severe thunderstorm watches also include the Florida Panhandle over to Savannah. But you see how that front is stationary? It's got both the warm front symbol and the cold front. Well, that means stationary, meaning it's not going to move much. And the next 24 hours, you're going to have another afternoon and evening of even more enhanced severe storms. So do expect more of that baseball size or bigger hail and some damaging winds. Jackson, Montgomery, and Albany, Georgia. That's just going to get a little more oomph from the atmosphere. That's from that jet stream. But below that jet, and it's a very active subtropical jet, you have serious heat and a heat dome that's building into what could be a dangerous weekend and really week of temperatures that are in the heat index up to 114. I mean, that's the thing, is if you have 1 or 2 days this time of year, okay. But when you're exposed, especially for prolonged times, look at the dates on the bottom there. Through Saturday in Houston, a heat index of 110. So it looks like it breaks down early next week, but that's a long time for folks to be enduring that heat there in Texas. Lindsay?
Really hot temperatures there. Ginger, our thanks to you. So much more to get to. Coming up, the literary world loses yet another iconic author. But next, we break down former President Trump's second arraignment for you by the numbers.
With so much at stake, so much on the line, more Americans turn here than any other newscast. ABC News World News Tonight with David Muir, America's #1 most watched newscast across all of television.
This is ABC News Live.
The crush of families here in Poland.
At refugee centers
in Putin's Russia.
On the ground in Ukraine.
Close to the front line.
From the capital, destructive Cat 4 storm.
You're along I-5.
Boston is in the bullseye.
Let's go.
ABC News Live, America's #1 streaming news. Anytime, anywhere. Streaming 24/7, straight to you for free.
Thank you for making ABC News Live